Hi everyone, I'm Grace St. Clair. I'm an estate planning attorney here in the South Bay in Redondo Beach, practicing quality estate planning. I also do some real estate work for my clients, and I was just thinking that there's a lot of people out there that are really struggling with a few issues as business owners about this crisis and how to handle their leases and maybe talk to their landlords. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what I have experienced and have Greg St. Clair here, my loving husband, help us also with his experiences because he is basically a landlord in many cases. So Greg, what do you have to share? How do you want to go about this?
Well, the COVID-19 impact on business has a significant impact on the relationship between tenant and landlord. If you have a tenant that's having a challenge with the revenue stream, making money, it's going to make it harder for them to pay their rent. Conversely, as a landlord myself, as well as an active investor and real estate consultant, I can tell you that from a landlord's perspective, we're not getting any assistance. Lenders are not helping us. There's really no assistance for the landlord. In fact, in many instances, with respect to lawmakers, landlords are the big bad landlord. However, what we have to do as landlords, in addition to collecting our rent, is we also have to maintain our properties, pay our property taxes, and do all of the things necessary to operate our real estate. We can't do that without being able to collect our rent.
Right. Well, what about those of us who may have qualified for a PP loan, or maybe those who haven't, and they do have rent that's due the first of every month, and they don't have any idea of what kind of money is going to be coming in? What do you suggest that we do to speak to our landlords and ask them for assistance, or what are our options?
Well, I think the most important thing for a tenant to do is really put what I do as a landlord into practice. So when our tenants come to us and look for assistance, I will typically say, okay, why don't you go ahead and give me an indication of what your sales and revenues look like before COVID-19, what you feel they're going to look like after the stay is lifted and you're back into operations. Then give me an indication of what kind of assistance you've applied for, and then go ahead and also give me some kind of indication of any obligations you're in default on. What I'm looking at is, are you going to be able to pay me back? If I defer your rent, are you going to then turn around and file bankruptcy, in which case I'll never collect that deferred rent? And so from a tenant's perspective, if you want to have an effective conversation with your landlord, I feel you put that on the other foot. You make a presentation to your landlord and say, my sales prior to COVID-19 were this. And once I'm able to be back in business, here's the receivables I have. Here's the orders I have. Here's the opportunities I have for my business to recover. So based on that, I'm going to go ahead and apply for assistance, but I need to go ahead and make certain that I'm able to weather the storm of the shelter-in-place order. So as a result, I'd like to request the following. And then instead of saying, I want to pay no rent, the natural response from a landlord is no. If you come to me as tenant and say, I know that we're in this together, so why don't I go ahead and pay you 25% rent? Or how about if I pay my operating expenses, but go ahead and defer my base rent? Then as a landlord, I'm more likely to say, okay, I'll go ahead and help you by providing you with X. So then you're working together on something that allows you to weather this storm and also be in a position where both parties know that what is deferred can be repaid. Mm-hmm. Because the last thing you want to do as a tenant is go and owe your landlord so much money that you're not going to be able to repay it.
Yeah, no, that's a problem. Well, let me tell you two things that we have heard. One of them is that mortgages are going to be deferred and banks are willing to let you slide on several things. And the other thing is that people are going to be able to just not pay things. So that's what we've been told, and that's why I think people are having that attitude. So what do you suggest how do we make that conversation with our landlords?
Well, that's just not true. Banks are not in a position to go ahead and help landlords unless you're in a significant degree of stress as a landlord. And that's really going to be isolated to certain property types, retail centers, malls that are completely shut down. And even then, if you look at mall operators and retail operators, a lot of those lenders are very hesitant to provide any meaningful assistance. I can tell you from our perspective, of our various lenders, only one of them has offered some assistance, and all they've done is delay the amortization of our loan. We still have to make our interest payments. In some of our long-term fixed rate financing, the life companies have basically taken the tack of, if you have or need some assistance, you need to come to us. They will make it so difficult for us to provide for anything that really what they're going to try to do is force us as owners to be in default before they even offer us any assistance. And then quite candidly, some of those lenders will force you into default because they want to pick up your property on 60 cents on the dollar. So as a landlord, we're between a rock and a hard place.
So you're saying the landlords aren't necessarily going to provide a ton of assistance without some knowledge that you're going to be able to provide some income to them in a short term.
I think you have to operate under the assumption that commercial lenders are going to provide little to no assistance to landlords.
But some of us are in smaller buildings, and we've been told by the state of California that we can't get kicked out. So many of us feel that, and I've heard this around town, that we're staying open, we're trying to maintain our income stream, but we don't know what it's going to be. We really don't. Well,
that's true. In the state of California, first of all, the enforcement of lease provisions and default provisions are going to vary by city, county by county, and state by state. In Los Angeles County, it's going to be different than Orange County, but in general, in California, a commercial landlord will not be able to evict you right now, but what they can do is accrue all of the damages associated with the default provisions in your lease. So let's say you decide to not pay rent for 12 months and I, as your landlord, can't evict you. At some point in time when the stay is ordered and I can evict you, you are going to have a massive default number that I will, as your landlord, go and collect, and I will sue you and I will force you into bankruptcy to collect it.
That doesn't sound good. Another thing that I have heard, which I thought was a little bit humorous, is that people have, knowing that they were going to get some assistance from their landlord, they were told they were going to get assistance by the media. They were also told that the lenders were going to allow people not to pay their mortgages, so they've assumed that also fits with the landlords. That they're, able to just not pay, and even though they are on a fixed income or money is coming in on a regular basis, let's say, there are some people who have asked for assistance when they have a fixed income stream coming in every month because they have contracts and they know that they're making money. Those kind of tenants, do you think they should go to their landlords and ask for assistance?
What we've seen as landlords is kind of interesting. There's a lot of smaller tenants that are shut down that don't want to owe money, and they begrudgingly ask for assistance. And typically what we have done is tried to match it to the duration of the stay in place or shelter in place orders, 60 to 90 days or whatever's happening. We've had larger tenants that have the financial wherewithal to pay, that feel that they want to go and request concessions or deferment. For example, I just read that Starbucks has approached 9,000 landlords requesting deferment, and I can tell you that probably 8,999 have said absolutely not, you can afford to pay us. Where I think the relationship can be helped and where the conversation I think is most effective is those tenants that really are impacted, because those landlords chose to invest in that type of property and work with that type of tenant, so they have to be responsive to that. I can't guarantee you that they will, but I think if a tenant has an effective and meaningful conversation with the landlord where you can go ahead and show that you were going to make an effort to pay and remain as a good tenant in standing once this is over, then I think you've got a great opportunity for the landlord to go ahead and not only provide that assistance, but our lenders want to know that we're just not willy-nilly waiving rent, because most loans, commercial loans, have provisions that provide for debt coverage, that don't allow you to make modifications of certain leases over a certain size, or put you in default. So as a landlord, you really have to be careful with your loan provisions. You might not be able to make any loan provision or lease modifications without approval of your lender. And right now, lenders aren't responding very quickly to anything. So there's a lot that goes into the equation when you're talking about a request for a rental deferral, on a commercial landlord that has a loan in place on his property.
So given the fact that there's still a lot of uncertainty and on everyone's side, I think the lenders don't know either. We saw that with the PPP loans. They didn't know what was going on half the time and weren't able to act quickly. No one has the same kind of employees that they had in the office like they were. So number one is don't think that you can't do anything. Number two is don't be afraid to go talk to your landlord and actually start the conversation. Even if you don't know exactly how it's going to end up, you should be honest that you want to stay in business, that is your interest. And then move to there about a little more of the financial conversation that you're suggesting. Given where you've been in the past, your rent is, coverable by your income normally, but what have you actually experienced and what can you offer them? Like maybe paying your rent on a weekly basis, or as money comes in, you'll pay, or I know we're really hesitant to use our PPP loans to pay rent because we have to make sure we have enough. Now we may have to be in place longer, and that program was only for 8 weeks of payroll. So we don't want to run out of our money. And I think that's, as a business owner, on my end, I don't know what's happening from one day to the next. It's very hard for me to actually project forward because I'm reliant on other people to come in and find my services valuable enough to pay for them.
Yeah, it's really a challenge because as a landlord, the government said that the PPP loans were going to be in place to cover payroll and necessary operating expenses, including rent. So all of us as landlords said, well, that's great. You're going to go ahead and get 2.5 months of rent. So I can go ahead and defer you and your PPP loan will cover it. Now, in practice, we're seeing that may or may not be the case. It varies tenant by tenant. I have some tenants that obtain their PPP funding and they want to pay the rent and they are paying the rent, and then they have others that receive their PPP and realize that they can barely cover their payroll with it. So that's why I think it's important to sit down and understand what your finances look like, and really kind of understand what it is you want to do and need to do, and then have a meaningful conversation with your landlord. And I think it's also a perfect opportunity for tenants and even real estate owners to really evaluate where they are, and it's a perfect time to reach out to your advisors, your accountant, your attorney, and a real estate consultant if you need to make certain that you understand what it is that you want to do, both in the short term and in the long term.
Those sounds like good tips. We're still in the middle of this. Let's hope we get out of it soon.
The uncertainty is what is hurting all of us, and so again, I just hope and pray each day that we find an end point to this so that we can all look to when we exit, and so that we can all get back to work, because at the end, that's what we all want to do, is just get back to work.
That's right. Thank you for listening.